The deep space around Kepler 442 held secrets that humanity had only dreamed of finding. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the massive alien structure drift slowly through the void ahead of them. The ship was unlike anything in human records, its hull covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. "How long has it been out here, Dr.?" Morrison asked, turning to Dr. Lisa Thompson, who was studying her scanner readings with intense focus. "Based on the radiation decay patterns, I'd estimate at least 10,000 years, possibly more," she replied, pushing her glasses up her nose. "The materials are completely unknown to us. This could be the greatest discovery in human history." Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez looked up from her navigation console, her dark eyes reflecting the alien ship's strange blue glow. "Captain, we're receiving no response to our standard greeting protocols. The ship appears to be completely dead." Chief Engineer Ben Carter wiped his hands on his uniform and joined the group near the main view screen. "Dead or not, that thing is massive. It's at least 3 times the size of our ship. If there's any technology still functional over there, it could change everything we know about space travel." Morrison nodded slowly. He had been exploring the outer reaches of human space for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. "Security Chief Phillips, what's your assessment?" Ryan Phillips stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. "Sir, standard protocol would be to approach with extreme caution. We don't know what automated defenses might still be active, and we certainly don't know if anyone or anything is still alive over there." The captain studied the alien vessel for several long moments. Every instinct told him to be careful, but the opportunity was too great to pass up. "Dr. Thompson, what do you need for a proper investigation?" "I'll need a full-away team, complete atmospheric testing equipment, and portable power units in case we need to activate any systems we find," she said, already making notes on her tablet. "This could be the key to understanding an entirely new form of technology." "Very well. Rodriguez, Carter, Phillips, and Thompson, you're with me. We'll take the shuttle over for an initial survey," Morrison announced. "Everyone else, maintain position and keep all sensors focused on that ship. If anything changes, I want to know immediately." An hour later, the 5 humans floated through the airlock of the alien vessel. Their helmet lights cut through the darkness, revealing corridors that stretched far beyond their vision. The architecture was beautiful in its strangeness, with flowing curves that seemed to follow no earthly logic. "Atmosphere is breathable, but I recommend keeping the suits on until we know more," Thompson reported, taking readings with her handheld scanner. "The air has a slightly higher oxygen content than Earth normal, but within acceptable ranges." Phillips moved ahead of the group, his weapon ready but not raised. "These corridors are definitely built for bipedal beings, but they're taller than humans would need. Whatever lived here was probably 7 or 8 feet tall." "Look at these symbols," Rodriguez said, pointing to markings carved into the walls. "They're everywhere, but they don't follow any pattern I can recognize. It's like they're trying to tell a story." Carter was examining the construction of the ship itself. "The metal composition is incredible. It's lighter than aluminum, but stronger than steel. If we could figure out how they made this, it would revolutionize our entire manufacturing process." As they moved deeper into the ship, the corridors began to open up into larger chambers. The first room they entered was clearly some kind of command center, with surfaces that might have been control panels arranged in a semicircle around a central platform. "This has to be the bridge," Morrison said, stepping onto the platform. Immediately, dim lights began to flicker on throughout the chamber, causing all 5 humans to freeze in place. "Captain, we're detecting massive power fluctuations throughout the ship," Rodriguez reported, checking her readings. "Something is definitely still active here." Thompson moved to one of the control surfaces and began taking detailed scans. "These panels are responding to our presence. The technology is so advanced that it's almost like magic. I'm detecting quantum-level processes that shouldn't be possible with any known materials." Phillips remained near the entrance, constantly scanning for threats. "Sir, I recommend we move quickly. If this ship has been dead for 10,000 years and suddenly starts powering up when we arrive, that might not be a coincidence. Agreed, Morrison said. Doctor, how long do you need to get a basic understanding of what we're dealing with? Give me 20 minutes with this central console, she replied, already connecting her portable computers to the alien systems. I might be able to download some basic operational data. As Thompson worked, the others explored the immediate area. Carter found what appeared to be engineering stations, their surfaces covered with symbols that pulsed with soft light. Rodriguez discovered what might have been navigation equipment, showing star charts that included systems humanity had never seen before. Captain, Phillips called out suddenly, we have company. Everyone turned to see a figure standing in the doorway they had entered through. The being was tall and elegant, with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. She wore what appeared to be armor made from the same material as the ship, and she carried a weapon that hummed with barely contained energy. I am Zarathul of the Velinary Empire, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite the fact that her lips barely moved. You are trespassing on sacred ground. Morrison stepped forward slowly, his hands visible and empty. I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance. We meant no disrespect. We found this vessel drifting and came to investigate. This ship belonged to my ancestors, Zarathul replied, her weapon still pointed at the floor but ready to be raised at any moment. The technology within it is not meant for primitive species to tamper with. We're not trying to steal anything, Thompson said, stepping away from the console. We're scientists. We just want to understand. Zarathul's large eyes focused on the human equipment connected to the ancient systems. You have already begun to corrupt sacred systems with your crude devices. This cannot be allowed. Phillips moved his hand toward his weapon, but Morrison gestured for him to stop. We can disconnect our equipment and leave peacefully. There's no need for conflict. The damage may already be done, Zarathul said, raising her weapon slightly. Your technology has awakened systems that were meant to remain dormant. What systems? Rodriguez asked. We're only taking passive readings. We haven't activated anything before Zarathul could respond. The central console began to glow brighter. Strange symbols appeared in the air above it, rotating slowly and pulsing with increasing intensity. You have triggered the memory core, Zarathul said, her voice filled with what sounded like horror. 10,000 years of stored experiences are about to be released. Philip stepped forward, his weapon now drawn. Captain, we need to evacuate immediately. No, Zarathul said, her own weapon now aimed directly at Phillips. It is too late for that. The awakening has begun, and someone must bear witness to what is revealed. The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. Philip saw the alien's finger tighten on her weapon and made a split-second decision to dive toward his captain. Zarathul's energy weapon discharged with a sound like thunder, catching Phillips in the shoulder and spinning him around. Ryan, Morrison shouted, rushing to his wounded security chief as the others scrambled for cover behind the alien control panels. Phillips. Blood splattered across the ancient console as he fell, mixing with the strange energy patterns that were now flowing freely through the ship's systems. The combination seemed to create a reaction that none of them had expected. We need to get out of here now. Carter yelled over the increasing noise from the alien systems. Rodriguez grabbed Phillips under his uninjured arm while Morrison took the other side. Can you move? I'll live, Phillips gasped, blood seeping through his suit, but we need to go. As the four humans retreated toward the airlock, carrying their wounded teammate, Zarathul remained behind. She was staring at the console where Philip's blood had mixed with the awakening alien technology, her weapon forgotten in her hand. Something was calling to her from that mixture of human blood and ancient power. Something that would change everything she thought she knew about the universe and the strange species that had just invaded her ancestor's ship. The humans escaped to their shuttle, but Zarathul could not leave. She was drawn to the console by a force stronger than curiosity, stronger than duty, stronger than fear. As she approached the glowing surface where human blood met alien technology, She had no idea that she was about to witness the entire violent history of a species that would soon become either her greatest enemy or her most unexpected ally. Zarathil stood alone in the ancient chamber, her weapon hanging forgotten at her side. The humans had fled with their wounded companion, but she could not bring herself to follow them or return to her own ship. Something about the way the human blood had mixed with the sacred technology called to her with a voice she could not ignore. The Velinari had always possessed the gift of psychometry, the ability to read the history of objects through touch. It was a skill that made them excellent warriors and investigators, allowing them to understand their enemies and solve ancient mysteries. But Zarathil had never encountered anything like what was happening on the console before her. The human blood glowed with a strange blue light where it had touched the alien metal. The patterns that flowed across the surface seemed to pulse in rhythm with her own heartbeat. She could feel the ancient technology responding to something in that crimson liquid, something that her ancestors had built this ship to detect and record. She reached out slowly, her hand trembling as she approached the glowing mixture. The moment her fingers made contact with the blood-stained surface, the universe exploded around her in a cascade of images and emotions that nearly drove her to her knees. Suddenly she was standing in a field of tall grass, watching a young human male in a blue uniform clutch a metal weapon against his chest. The human's name came to her as if whispered by the wind: Daniel Brooks. He was barely more than a child, with frightened eyes and hands that shook as he prepared to charge across an open field toward other humans who were shooting at him. The vision was so real that Zarathil could smell the gunpowder and hear the screams of wounded soldiers. She felt Daniel's terror as he ran forward, his legs carrying him toward almost certain death. But beneath the fear was something else, something that surprised her: determination. This young human was not running toward battle because he enjoyed killing, but because he believed in something greater than himself. The scene shifted like smoke in the wind, and she found herself in a muddy trench filled with human soldiers. The smell of death and decay was overwhelming, but the humans continued to fight. Through the eyes of a soldier named Kevin Murphy, she experienced the horror of poison gas rolling across the battlefield like a green tide of death. Kevin was writing a letter to someone named Mary, his hands shaking as he tried to form the words. "I dream of home every night," he wrote, "but I know my duty is here." The letter was stained with mud and blood, but he folded it carefully and placed it in his pocket next to his heart. The visions came faster now, each one more intense than the last. She saw a human named Tony Valdez charging up a beach while metal projectiles whistled around him like angry insects. The water around him was red with blood, and the sand was littered with the bodies of his companions. But he kept moving forward, driven by loyalty to the humans beside him. In another flash, she was with Paul Henderson in mountains covered with snow and ice. The cold was so intense that it felt like knives cutting through her skin, but the humans endured it without complaint. They shared their food and warmth with each other, creating bonds that were stronger than family ties. The technology seemed to be showing her something specific, something important about these humans and their endless conflicts. Each vision revealed not just the violence, but the reasons behind it. These humans did not fight because they were savage beasts, but because they were willing to sacrifice everything for their beliefs and their companions. She saw Carlos Sanchez moving through thick jungle, his face painted with mud and his eyes constantly scanning for danger. The vegetation was so thick that he could barely see 10 feet in any direction, but he moved with the confidence of someone who had learned to survive in impossible conditions. When one of his companions stepped on a hidden explosive device, Carlos threw himself forward to shield the others from the blast. The visions began to blur together. As the alien technology fed her centuries of human warfare, she saw knights in metal armor charging across muddy fields, their faces hidden behind steel masks, but their courage visible in every movement. She witnessed sailors fighting storms that seemed determined to drag them to the bottom of the ocean, their ships nothing more than wooden shells against the fury of nature. Through it all, she began to understand something fundamental about these humans. They were not the mindless aggressors she had expected. Every conflict showed the same pattern: humans fighting not for the joy of battle, but for something they believed was worth protecting. They fought for their families, their friends, their beliefs, and their freedom. The console pulsed brighter, and she found herself experiencing the memories of the humans she had wounded. Ryan Phillips had grown up in a place called Detroit, where violence was common and hope was rare. But instead of becoming bitter, he had chosen to dedicate his life to protecting others. She felt his pain as he lay bleeding on the ancient floor. But even in his agony, his first thought was for his companion's safety. The visions showed her Phillips memories of joining something called the military after a terrible attack on his homeland. Thousands of innocent humans had died in a single morning, and Phillips had decided that he would spend his life making sure it never happened again. He had trained for years, learning to fight not because he loved violence, but because he understood that sometimes violence was the only way to protect the innocent. She saw through his eyes as he stood, guard over sleeping children in distant lands, ensuring that they could wake up safely in the morning. She felt his exhaustion during long patrols in dangerous places, and his quiet satisfaction when he managed to help someone who could not help themselves. The technology was relentless, showing her conflict after conflict, war after war. But in each vision she saw the same truth. Humans fought because they cared about something more than their own safety. They were willing to die for abstract concepts like freedom and justice, and they were willing to kill to protect those who could not protect themselves. As the visions continued, Zarathul began to realize that she was seeing something unprecedented. Her people had encountered many species in their travels across the galaxy, but none had ever shown this combination of violence and compassion. Most species fought for territory or resources, but humans seemed to fight for ideas and principles. The console grew brighter still, and she knew that she had only begun to understand what the ancient technology was trying to show her. The human blood was somehow unlocking records that had been stored for millennia, records of a species that had fought 300 wars and somehow emerged from each, one more determined to protect the innocent and defend the helpless. She gripped the edge of the console as another wave of visions crashed over her, knowing that she was about to learn something that would change everything she thought she knew about warfare, about courage, and about what it truly meant to be a warrior in a universe full of darkness and pain. The alien technology pulled Zarathul deeper into the ocean of human memory, and she found herself witnessing conflicts that stretched back through thousands of years. The console beneath her hands grew warmer as more visions flooded her mind, each one revealing another layer of human nature that she had never imagined could exist. She stood on a dusty plain and watched as thousands of humans in metal armor marched in perfect formation toward an enemy they could barely see. Through the eyes of a commander named Marcus Aurelius, she felt the weight of responsibility for every life under his command. He was not just a warrior but a philosopher, someone who understood that war was terrible but sometimes necessary to protect civilization itself. The vision shifted, and she found herself in a stone castle watching a knight named William Marshall prepare for battle. His armor was heavy and his sword was sharp, but what struck her most was the code he lived by. He fought not for glory or treasure, but because he had sworn an oath to protect those who could not protect themselves. Even when facing enemies who showed no mercy, he insisted on treating prisoners with dignity and sparing civilians from harm. Time flowed like water around her, and she saw human warriors in every age and place. She witnessed Viking raiders who seemed savage at first glance, but who followed strict laws about honorable combat and the protection of women and children. She saw samurai warriors in distant lands who would rather die than break their word, and Celtic warriors who sang songs of their ancestors as they charged into battle. The technology showed her a conflict that seemed to define everything about human warfare. She found herself with a captain named Nathan Blake as he led his men across a frozen river on a winter night. The humans were rebelling against their own rulers, fighting for something they called freedom. Blake's feet were wrapped in bloody rags and his men were starving, but they followed him without question because they believed in the cause he represented. She felt Blake's anguish as he watched his soldiers suffer, But she also felt his determination to create a world where future generations would be free from tyranny. These humans were not fighting for conquest or revenge, but for an idea that had never existed before. The notion that all people deserved to choose their own destiny. The visions brought her to conflicts that showed the complexity of human nature. She witnessed the American Civil War through the eyes of soldiers on both sides, seeing how humans could fight each other with incredible violence while still maintaining respect for their enemies. She saw a Confederate soldier named Robert Lee surrendering his sword to a Union general named Ulysses Grant, and felt the mutual respect between two warriors who had fought each other with everything they had through the eyes of a cavalry officer named Samuel Collins. She experienced the Indian Wars and saw how humans could fight for what they believed was right, while still recognizing the courage of their enemies. Collins wrote in his journal about the bravery of the Native American warriors he faced, describing them as the finest light cavalry in the world. Even as he fought against them, the technology showed her the other side of that same conflict through the memories of a Lakota warrior named Running Bear. She felt his love for the land and his people, and his determination to protect them from invaders who did not understand the sacred nature of the earth itself. Running Bear fought not out of hatred, but out of love for everything he held dear. The visions moved forward in time, showing her conflicts that grew larger and more terrible with each passing year. She saw the Spanish-American War through the eyes of a soldier named Theodore Roosevelt, who led men up a hill in the face of enemy fire not for personal glory, but because he believed America had a duty to help oppressed people around the world. She witnessed the Mexican-American War through the memories of a young officer named Robert Anderson, who questioned the justice of the conflict even as he fought bravely in it. Anderson wrote letters to his wife describing his doubts about the war, but also his determination to do his duty to the men under his command. The technology pulled her into the 20th century, and she saw warfare transformed by machines that could kill on a scale previously unimaginable. She experienced the First World War through the eyes of countless soldiers who endured horrors that would have broken lesser beings. She saw a pilot named Eddie Rickenbacker fighting in the skies above France, turning aerial combat into a deadly dance of skill and courage. She witnessed the Second World War through the memories of soldiers who fought against enemies that represented pure evil. Through the eyes of a tank commander named George Patton, she felt the righteous anger of humans who had discovered that their enemies were committing atrocities beyond imagination. These humans fought not just for victory but for the very concept of human decency. The visions showed her a Marine named John Barcelone fighting on a Pacific island, holding his position against overwhelming odds, not because he enjoyed killing, but because he knew that every enemy he stopped was one less threat to the innocent people back home. She felt his fear and his determination, and his quiet satisfaction when he managed to save the lives of his fellow Marines. She saw the Korean War through the eyes of a sergeant named William Dean, who fought in brutal cold against an enemy that seemed to have unlimited numbers. Dean's men were outnumbered and outgunned, but they held their ground because they believed in something bigger than themselves, the idea that freedom was worth fighting for. Even in a distant land, the technology brought her to Vietnam, where she experienced the complexity of modern warfare through the memories of a helicopter pilot named Hugh Thompson. She felt his horror when he realized that some of his own side were committing atrocities, and his courage when he chose to protect innocent civilians even though it meant defying his own commanders. Through Thompson's eyes, she saw that humans had developed not just more powerful weapons, but also stronger moral codes. These warriors were willing to risk their own lives and careers to protect the innocent, even when those innocents were supposed to be their enemies. The visions showed her conflicts in the Middle East, where humans fought against enemies who used terror as a weapon. She experienced the memories of soldiers who had to learn to distinguish between combatants and civilians in situations where the difference was often impossible to determine. She saw their struggle to maintain their humanity while fighting enemies who seemed to have abandoned theirs. Through the eyes of a soldier named Marcus Luttrell, she felt the bonds that held human warriors together even in the face of certain death. Luttrell's team was surrounded and outnumbered, but they fought to protect each other with a loyalty that transcended any hope of personal survival. The console pulsed with increasing intensity, and Zarathil realized that she was approaching the present day. The visions had shown her 300 conflicts spanning thousands of years, but she was beginning to understand that they were all part of a single story, the story of a species that had learned to fight not for the joy of battle, but for the preservation of everything they held sacred. As the next wave of visions prepared to crash over her, she braced herself for what she knew would be the most difficult part of her journey, seeing the very conflict she was now part of, and understanding how her own actions fit into the long history of human warfare. The visions began to slow as they approached the present day, and Zarathil found herself experiencing memories that were fresh and immediate. The ancient technology was now showing her the very humans she had just encountered, revealing their thoughts and motivations in ways that made her question everything she thought she knew about their species. She found herself standing on the bridge of the UES Defiance, seeing through the eyes of Captain Jake Morrison as he made the decision to explore the alien derelict. She felt his excitement at the possibility of discovery, but also his deep concern for the safety of his crew. Morrison had commanded ships before, and he carried the weight of every decision that had led to the injury or death of the people under his command. The vision showed her Morrison's first encounter with hostile alien forces 3 years earlier. His previous ship had been attacked without warning by a species called the Krillians, who had destroyed half his crew before he managed to escape. She felt his grief for the friends he had lost, and his determination to never let such a thing happen again. But what surprised her most was Morrison's reaction to that tragedy. Instead of becoming bitter or vengeful, he had dedicated himself to developing better protocols for first contact. He had spent months working with diplomats and scientists, trying to create procedures that would prevent future conflicts. Even now, approaching her ancestor's ship, his first instinct had been to communicate rather than attack. The technology shifted her perspective, and she found herself experiencing the memories of Dr. Lisa Thompson. Through Thompson's eyes, she saw decades of research dedicated to understanding alien species and finding peaceful ways to interact with them. Thompson had devoted her entire career to the belief that most conflicts could be avoided through knowledge and communication. She felt Thompson's frustration with military commanders who saw every unknown species as a potential threat. The doctor had watched too many first contact situations turn violent because of misunderstandings and fear. Her portable computers contained detailed protocols for peaceful interaction with dozens of different alien species, all based on careful study of their cultures and psychology. The vision showed her Thompson's memories of studying the Velinari themselves. The doctor had access to old records from previous encounters, and she had specifically recommended caution when dealing with Zarathil's people because she understood that they were proud warriors who valued honor above all else. Thompson had advised Morrison to approach any Velinari with respect and dignity, knowing that their culture demanded it. The technology brought her into the mind of Amy Rodriguez, and she saw the young lieutenant's memories of growing up in a family of explorers. Rodriguez's father had been a deep space navigator, and her mother had been a xenobiologist like Thompson. She had been raised to see the universe as a place of wonder and possibility, not danger and conflict. Rodriguez had joined the space service not to fight wars, but to explore the unknown and make contact with new forms of life. She spent her free time studying alien languages and cultures, hoping that her knowledge might help prevent the kind of misunderstandings that led to violence. Even now, as she fled from Zarathil's weapon, her primary concern was finding a way to communicate and resolve the conflict peacefully. The visions brought her to Ben Carter, and she experienced the engineer's memories of building systems designed to help rather than harm. Carter had spent years developing technologies that could repair damaged alien vessels and provide emergency life support to stranded crews. His tools were weapons against ignorance and suffering, not against living beings. She felt Carter's pride in his work, but also his constant worry about how his inventions might be misused. He had seen too many peaceful technologies turned into weapons by people who lacked imagination. His greatest dream was to work alongside alien engineers, sharing knowledge and creating devices that could benefit all intelligent life. The technology showed her Carter's memory of the first time he had seen alien technology in action. Instead of fear, he had felt wonder and excitement. He had immediately begun analyzing the systems, not to find weaknesses to exploit, but to understand the brilliant minds that had created them. Even the weapon that had wounded Phillips was something Carter found fascinating rather than threatening. The most difficult vision came when she found herself in the mind of Ryan Phillips himself. She felt his pain as he lay bleeding on the ancient floor, but she also felt his concern for his teammates. Phillips had thrown himself into danger not because he enjoyed violence, but because he could not bear the thought of his friends being hurt. She saw Phillips' memories of growing up in a city where violence was common and hope was rare. He had watched good people suffer while those with power did nothing to help them. His decision to join the military had been motivated by a desire to protect those who could not protect themselves, just like the warriors she had seen in the previous visions. The technology showed her Phillips' training, and she was surprised to discover that most of it had focused on restraint and de-escalation. He had been taught to use violence only as a last resort, and to always look for peaceful solutions to conflicts. Even his decision to draw his weapon in the ancient chamber had been motivated by a desire to protect his captain, not by any aggressive impulse. She felt Phillips' regret as he realized that his actions had escalated the situation. He had not wanted to fight her, but his training and instincts had taken over when he saw what he perceived as a threat to his crew. Even as he lost consciousness from his wounds, his last thought had been an apology to his teammates for failing to find a peaceful solution. The visions began to overlap and blend together, showing her the common threads that connected all the humans she had encountered. Each of them carried the weight of their species' history, the accumulated knowledge of 300 wars and countless acts of courage and sacrifice. They were not mindless aggressors, but inheritors of a tradition that valued protection over conquest and sacrifice over personal gain. She saw how each human had been shaped by the conflicts of the past, learning from the mistakes and triumphs of their predecessors. Morrison's caution came from the hard-learned lessons of previous commanders, who had lost ships and crews to hasty decisions. Thompson's dedication to peaceful contact grew from the knowledge that most wars could be prevented through understanding and communication. The technology showed her something even more profound. Despite all the warfare in their history, humans had never stopped hoping for peace. Every conflict had been followed by efforts to prevent future wars, and every generation had worked to create a better world for their children. The warriors she had seen in the visions had fought not because they loved battle, but because they dreamed of a time when battle would no longer be necessary. As the visions began to fade, Zarathul realized that she was seeing the completion of a pattern that had begun thousands of years ago. The humans had learned to fight with incredible skill and determination, but they had also learned to value mercy, compassion, and the protection of the innocent. They were warriors who dreamed of peace, and peacemakers who were willing to fight for their dreams. The console beneath her hands pulsed one final time, and she knew that she was about to see the most important vision of all, the choice that lay before her in the present moment, and the role she would play in determining whether the pattern of human history would continue or be broken forever. The final vision came to Zarathul like a gentle wave rather than the crushing flood she had experienced before. The ancient technology was showing her something that no amount of historical knowledge could have prepared her for: the true nature of what it meant to be human in a universe filled with darkness and uncertainty. She saw the pattern now, stretching across thousands of years and hundreds of conflicts. Every war had taught humans something new about the cost of violence and the value of peace. Every battle had been followed by efforts to heal, to rebuild, and to prevent future suffering. The 300 wars were not a sign of human savagery, but proof of their incredible capacity for growth and learning. The technology showed her human societies after their conflicts had ended. She saw former enemies working together to rebuild destroyed cities, veterans dedicating their lives to helping war orphans and soldiers returning home to become teachers and healers. The same humans who had fought with such determination were equally determined to create a better world when the fighting was over. She witnessed the creation of human institutions designed to prevent war and protect the innocent. She saw the formation of organizations dedicated to feeding the hungry, healing the sick, and educating the ignorant. The humans had learned that true victory came not from defeating enemies, but from creating a world where enemies were no longer necessary. The visions showed her human memorials to their fallen warriors, and she was surprised by what she found. These monuments did not celebrate violence or glorify conquest. Instead, they honored sacrifice and remembered the cost of freedom. Humans built these memorials not to inspire future wars, but to remind themselves why peace was worth preserving. She saw mothers teaching their children about the horrors of war, and veterans sharing their experiences to help others understand the true price of conflict. Human society was built on the accumulated wisdom of those who had seen the worst that intelligent beings could do to each other, and who had chosen to dedicate their lives to preventing such things from happening. Again, the technology revealed something even more profound. Humans had developed the ability to feel empathy for their enemies. She saw soldiers sharing their food with captured foes, medics treating wounded enemies with the same care they gave their own people, and commanders showing mercy to those who had shown them none. This was not weakness, she realized, but the highest form of strength. It took more courage to spare an enemy than to kill one, more wisdom to seek understanding than to demand surrender, and more honor to choose compassion over revenge. The humans had learned these lessons through centuries of pain and suffering, but they had learned them completely. The console beneath her hands began to dim as the visions faded, but the knowledge they had given her burned bright in her mind. She understood now why the ancient technology had been created. Her ancestors had built it to identify species that had the potential to transcend their violent nature and become true partners in the preservation of life and civilization. She heard footsteps in the corridor behind her and turned to see Captain Morrison and his team returning. They moved carefully, their weapons ready but not raised, their faces showing concern rather than anger. Phillips was with them, his wounded arm in a makeshift sling, but his eyes alert and determined. Morrison stepped into the chamber first, his hands visible and empty. "We came back for our equipment," he said, his voice steady but not threatening. "And to check on you." Zarathil looked at him with new understanding. She could see the weight of command in his eyes, the burden of making decisions that affected the lives of those who trusted him. But she could also see the hope that still burned within him, the belief that even the worst conflicts could be resolved through courage and understanding. "You came back?" she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Even after I attacked you, even after I wounded your companion, you came back." Thompson stepped forward, her medical scanner in her hands. "You seemed distressed when we left." "We wanted to make sure you were all right." It was such a simple statement, but it carried the weight of everything Zarathil had learned. These humans had been attacked by her, had seen their friend wounded by her weapon, and their first concern upon returning was for her welfare. It was exactly the kind of response she had seen in the visions, the same pattern of compassion and concern that had defined human behavior for thousands of years. Phillips moved slowly toward her, his good hand extended in a gesture of peace. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice sincere. "I didn't mean to escalate the situation. I was just trying to protect my captain." The apology stunned her. This human had been wounded because of her actions, had every right to hate her or demand revenge, and instead he was apologizing for his own defensive response. She saw in his eyes the same dedication to protecting others that had motivated every warrior in the visions, the same willingness to put the welfare of others above his own safety. Rodriguez was scanning the chamber with her instruments, but her attention was focused on Zarathil rather than the technology. "The energy readings are incredible," she said softly. "What did you experience here?" "I saw the truth," Zarathil replied, her weapon still hanging at her side. "I saw 3. "100 wars," and I understood what they meant. Carter approached the console where Philip's blood still glowed with alien light. "The technology responded to human DNA," he said with excitement. "It was designed to interface with your species specifically. This could change everything we know about galactic history." But Zarathel was no longer thinking about technology or history. She was thinking about the choice that lay before her, the decision that would determine whether the pattern she had witnessed would continue or be broken. She had seen what humans were capable of, both in war and in peace, and she knew that. Her next action would echo through the centuries. She looked at Morrison, seeing in his eyes the same determination and compassion that had characterized every human leader in the visions. She looked at Thompson, recognizing the dedication to knowledge and understanding that had driven human progress for millennia. She looked at Rodriguez, seeing the curiosity and hope that had carried humans to the stars. She looked at Carter, recognizing the desire to build rather than destroy that had always followed human conflicts, and she looked at Phillips, seeing in his wounded form the willingness to sacrifice for others that had defined human courage throughout their history. The choice was simple, really. She could continue the cycle of violence and suspicion that had characterized first contact between their species, or she could do something that had never been done before. She could choose to trust in the lessons of 300 wars and the wisdom they had produced. Slowly, deliberately, Zarathel opened her hand and let her weapon fall to the floor. The sound it made as it struck the ancient metal echoed through the chamber like a bell, tolling the end of an age of misunderstanding. "I have seen what your people truly are," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber to reach every human present. "You are not conquerors or destroyers. You are survivors who learn to hope, warriors who dream of peace, and protectors who would rather heal than harm." She knelt beside Phillips, placing her hands on his wounded shoulder. The healing techniques of her people were different from human medicine, but they would help his body repair itself more quickly. "Your blood showed me the truth," she said softly. 300 wars taught your people not to love violence, but to value peace. Every conflict made you stronger not because it taught you to fight, but because it taught you why fighting should always be the last choice. Morrison stepped forward, his expression filled with hope and understanding. "Does this mean our people can work together?" Zarathel stood and faced him, seeing in his eyes the same hope that had sustained humans through their darkest hours. "It means more than that," she said. "It means that the universe is about to discover what happens when two warrior species choose cooperation over conflict, understanding over suspicion, and hope over fear." The ancient chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of alien technology that had finally fulfilled its purpose. Philip's blood continued to glow on the console, no longer a symbol of violence, but a bridge between two species that had learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength comes not from the ability to wage war, but from the wisdom to choose peace when war is no longer necessary. The age of misunderstanding was over, and the age of cooperation had begun.